let's talk about adding and multiplying fractions. Now, when we're adding fractions together, you must have what's called a common denominator. Denominator, the bottom of the fraction. We have to have the same number on the bottom of both fractions in order to add them together. So let's see one that looks like that. Let's say we have 3/5 plus 1/5. I'm going to add those together. So I look at the bottoms. The bottoms, the denominators are both 5. So they're already the same. They're already common. And when we're adding, we keep that common denominator in the answer. And then we add the numbers on the top. So the 3 and the 1 make a 4. So my answer to this is 4/5. Now this is all fine and dandy when you have the same number on the bottom. Most chances we're not going to have that common denominator. In this case, I take 1/2 plus 1/8, not the same number on the bottom. All right, but luckily we might be able to change these fractions into equal fractions that maybe have a different number on the bottom. And we're looking to create the least common multiple or lowest common multiple. Okay, so I look at my two bottom numbers. I have a 2 and I have an 8. Usually look at the smaller one. Is there any number I can multiply to 2 to turn it into an 8? And that answer would be yes, I can multiply it by 4. Okay, but if I multiply the bottom of this fraction by 4, it's going to come out to an 8. And then this side's already an 8, so I'll leave the 1 there. But if I multiply the bottom by 4, I also need to multiply the top by 4. Because you notice that 4 over 4 is a 1. We didn't change the value of it by multiplying by 1. We're just changing how it looks. So on top, 4 times 1 is still a 4. And if I reduced 4 over 8, would I still come back to 1/2? Yeah, it's the same thing. It just looks different. And that's what we're trying to do. Because now my new fractions are common denominator. And I can write that bottom number here, 8, and then adding on the top 4 and 1 now make it 5. So 5/8 is my answer. So when numbers are not the same on the bottom, we can multiply by technically 1, just using different numbers to get to where we want to go. So let's say we had 4/3 plus 1/5. We can use that same process. I don't have the same number on the bottom. I have a 3 and a 5. So usually I can look at the smaller one, the 3. Is there any way I can multiply by a number to get a 5? Not very easily. And I can't really multiply something by 5 to get a 3. So if I can't change one into the other, we might need to change both. So we're looking for a higher number that both of those go into, not too big. The next thing, and one way to do that is kind of just multiply those two numbers together. And that usually gives us a good idea. So 3 times 5 would be a 15. Both of those numbers do go into 15, so 15 is the number I want to create here. And individually, I had a 3, I need to get to 15, I multiply by 5. But what I do to the bottom, I also have to do to the top. So that 4 times that 5 gives me a 20. Now on the other side, I had a 5, I need to get to 15, so I multiplied by 3. But what I do to the bottom, I also have to do to the top. And 1 times 3 is 3. So these are the same values, they just look different. And now adding these together, we get a 23 over 15. Okay. Let's try some more. Now we may run into some special cases here. For example, 7 over 8 plus 1 over 6. It's not common denominator. I can't change an 8 into a 6, and I can't change a 6 into an 8, so we got to play with both of them. Now we've got a couple options here. You could do what we did last time, multiply 8 and 6 together, and now you've got a 48 on the bottom. Now that's a kind of big number. What might be helpful is let's look for the lowest common multiple. What numbers do 8 and 6 both go into? So hopefully there's something smaller than a 48. Let's see, the multiples of 8 are 8, 16, 24, 32. And then 6 goes 6, 12, 18, 24, and look at that, we do have a common number that we can get to. Smaller than 48. Eventually 48 will work, it's just we'll have to simplify a bit more. This is the lowest one. This will be the easiest one to get to. So let's get to a 24 on the bottom, that common number. So in order to go from 8 to a 24, we have to multiply by 3. And what we do at the bottom, we do at the top. 3 times 7 is a 21. And again, this whole thing reduces back to 7 over 8. Over on the right-hand side, going from a 6 to a 24, we're going to multiply by 4. What I do to the bottom, do to the top. 4 times 1 is 4. And again, that reduces back to 1/6. But the reason we wanted to make these numbers a little bigger is because now we have common denominator and we can add these together. Bottom number stays how it is and the top number adds up to a 25. Now we can do the same thing if this turns into subtraction. Okay. Now we didn't really talk about it earlier, but we can do subtraction problems. It's the same thing as addition, just with a minus sign. So let's say we had 9 over 8 minus 2 over 7. Whether it's adding or subtracting, you still need common denominator. So you just work it the same, but we're going to subtract numbers later on. 8 and 7, the common denominator you want to use, and the lowest thing we can use, multiplying those together, would be a 56. 8 times 7, 56. So I'm going to multiply this side by 7 to get there, and do it to the top as well. So 7 times 9, 63. Over here we'll multiply by a 8, top and bottom, so 16. So just like addition, we need common denominator when we're subtracting. So 56 stays on the bottom, but now it's a subtraction sign. So on top, 63 minus 16 comes out to a 47. All right, one more thing to look at. Let's talk about multiplying fractions. So adding and subtraction was actually harder than multiplication. When you're multiplying fractions, you do not need common denominator. So only for adding and subtracting do you need common denominator. For multiplying, you don't. You do not need it. So for example, if they gave us 3/5 times 6/8, it's not common denominator, but it doesn't really matter because we're multiplying here. Multiplying fractions is easy. You just multiply across the top and multiply across the bottom. All right, so not like adding where we need common denominator. Multiplying, you just go right across. 3 times 6 is an 18, and 8 times 5, a 40. Now the only thing that happens is we got pretty big numbers, so we can simplify this. Both are divisible by 2, so 18 divided by 2 is a 9, and 40 divided by 2 is a 20. So there's a simplified answer. But again, it's not so bad when you're multiplying. One last one. Let's say we have negative 1/6 times 4/10. Again, this negative sign doesn't affect us. That's just telling the first number is negative. The real operation is the multiplication. So multiply across the top and the bottom. So on top, negative 1 times 4 is a negative 4. And on bottom, 6 times 10 is a 60. And it looks like these again can reduce by, we could use a 2, or a little bit bigger, we can use a 4 into both of these. 4 goes into negative 4 one time, keep it negative. And then 4 goes into 60 15 times. There's our fully simplified answer. So again, just to round it out, adding and subtracting fractions, you need common denominator. You need the same number on the bottom. Multiplying fractions, just multiply across the top and across the bottom. Nothing fancy.